Okay. Am I on? I think I am on. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rob Leverett. I'm the chairman of the election subcommittee. So in the spirit of the airlines, when they announce where you're flying to, this is the election subcommittee. So if you're here for a different committee, you may, we're happy for you to stick around. We hope we'll give you your money's worth and will be entertained, but you may want to excuse yourself. I'd like to open the meeting today with prayer. Victor, I didn't give you fair warning, but I know you're a virtuoso. If you wouldn't mind returning thanks.
I do not mind at all. Pray with me, please. Dear kind and heavenly Father, God, we thank you, Lord, for the beautiful part of this world that you allow us all to live in, Lord. God, we thank you for each and every person's input and everybody's involvement in our servant leadership to this state. God, we ask your guiding hand in all that we consider and take up today, Lord, and we ask your wisdom in the decisions made. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Victor. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought what I would do first is just sort of outline what we plan to do today so you can kind of follow along with us and bear with me. I'm presiding at my first subcommittee meeting here today, so to the extent we stumble around and flop around a little bit, I hope you'll please bear with me. One thing I thought we would do is go around and introduce the committee members so everybody knows who we all are. And then I was going to have the announce the bill and have Chairman Powell present the bill. And Chairman Powell, you can just present it from up here if you like. There is a committee sub that I've distributed to the members of the committee for review that I'll kind of review. There are about 5 or 6 changes, and I can discuss that after Chairman Powell's presentation. And then we'll go through folks who wish to give testimony. So as I mentioned earlier, if you do want to speak to us today, I would ask that you go ahead and sign the sign-up sheet, because that's what we're going to be calling folks from, and that'll give us an idea of how many people we have to speak so we can know the time we can allot you. We have, I think, a hard stop at 2 for the next subcommittee meeting, so we'll need to adjust the time we can hear from you based on when we get to that point in the meeting. And we'd ask y'all to come to the podium over here and speak. Because this is being streamed, I'm assuming, and we need you to talk in the microphone. So, and then after that, we'll call for motions and take any action the committee deems appropriate. So I guess we'd start off. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Rob Leverett. I represent House District 123. Chairman Powell tells me they were all confident I could at least count that high. And I'm adjacent to Chairman Powell. I'm in Elberton, which is up in northeast Georgia, and I'm very honored to have been appointed by Chairman LaHood to serve as chairman of this subcommittee. And I thought what I'd do maybe is go at the end here and then come back and around on introducing ourselves.
Thank you, Chairman Leverett. I'm John LaHood. I chair the Governmental Affairs Committee, and we'll be holding a hearing tomorrow, and look forward to serving and working with all of you. I represent District 175, which is anchored in Valdosta, South Georgia.
I'm Victor Anderson, House District 10, and contrary to the chairman's comment, he does not live in northeast Georgia. I do. I represent Habersham and Rabun County, so you don't get much more northeast than that. But I'm glad to be here and part of the subcommittee.
That's the mountains battle. So, Chairman Powell.
My name is Alan Powell. I'm from beautiful Lake Hartwell. I share a district, the Free State of Madison, with Chairman Leverett. I've been in the legislature a few years. I used to chair this committee, 25 years or so ago, and I've had several other chairmanships since that point. I guess the best way you can call me the Walter Matthau of the legislature. I'm one of the grumpy ones because I just kind of like to tell it the way it is.
Thank you. I'm Representative Misha Maynor. I represent Atlanta, Georgia, which is the heart of the state, just around the corner from here. Glad to be here.
Oh, sorry. I thought there was I apologize. I was thinking there was another legislator behind me. I'm Representative Shay Roberts. I represent District 52. This is my second term in the legislature and my second year on the Governmental Affairs Committee. I was not on the Elections Subcommittee last time, so it's my first time on this one. So happy to be here today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Philip Olalier, represent House District 59, which is entirely in Fulton County, representing parts of Southwest, Southeast Atlanta, and a few neighborhoods east of Atlanta, and newly elected, so really looking forward to serving on this subcommittee.
Got me? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Representative Deborah Bazemore, and I represent Fayette and Fulton County, and I was elected in 2016. And this is my first time serving on this committee, but I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Representative. It's my first time serving on the Elections Subcommittee, I believe, and I'm equally as excited and very pleased to be serving as y'all's chairman. So thank you for that. So I believe the next order of business would be to take up the bill that's before us. There's only one bill on the agenda today, and that's Chairman Powell's bill, House Bill 17. So Chairman Powell, unless I'm messing up, let me stop before I go. I forgot to mention, this is Molly Aziz, who is our analyst with the House Budget and Research Office, and then Stuart Morelli at the end of the counter here is he's our attorney from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So we certainly appreciate everything they do for me. And Molly, I'm appreciating you so much in being able to operate the machine here. I would never be able to figure that out. So, Chairman Powell, if you would just go ahead and you can, from your seat, just tell us about your legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for introducing the two most important people in here, and that's Molly and Stewart, because they're the ones that make this world go round, as does all our staff do. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I'll give you a little background. House Bill 17 is actually pretty simple. This bill passed the legislature last year pretty well overwhelmingly across both parties. The product of this, the genesis of this bill, came from some of the work that we had done the year prior before with the Special Elections Committee after the 2020 elections. This bill came to us from a local constituent in Northeast Georgia, and the lady had listened to all of the issues that we had dealt with in the election reform. Had heard some of the preaching that I had been given, that the number one issue was that out of all the counties, there was no uniformity, that we had certain counties that were doing some things, other counties that weren't. We went through a ruckus, a political ruckus, of being branded for things, from voter suppression and everything else. But what finally the end product of it was, that showed with the changes that we made legislatively about uniformity and putting things in code, was that we actually had a pretty good election this year. I mean, Fulton County, DeKalb, the metro counties actually had their results in on time, which was a great deal of satisfaction to the people in the other part of Georgia who always has high suspicions. The folks in rural Georgia actually did a pretty good job, and the elections this year came out fine. I think that the fallacy of that we were trying to stop a lot of votes obviously didn't work, because we had record turnouts this year. So we've got a system that's working better, but when you have two Georgias, then that's the necessity of codifying things so that no matter which election board, whichever county it is, that they all run the same to dispel any suspicions of any wrongdoing or anything else, whether it's justified or not. House Bill 17, as I had said previously, was passed because we had constituents that belonged to both myself and Chairman Leverett that said that one of the things that we left out was a chain of custody, and that was left out, and we came back last year and we passed it. It was a very good bill, and it just basically, because of the current or the past leadership in our Senate, which is usually a case, they somehow just didn't get around to it on that last night. And so we're back with that bill. This bill is exactly what we passed out of the House that was waiting in the Senate, the wings of the Senate. Quite frankly, if you'll look through it, when I say chain of custody, if you'll look through the bill, and when I say simple, it's pretty simple, but it deals with the absentee ballots that are cast in drop boxes. It provides a chain of custody of sealing and labeling, and whoever is dealing with them to sign those, to sign the pickup and all of that in that chain. It goes to the absentees that are returned after the polls are closed. Those are put into a certain lockbox, locked and sealed with a generally like a criminal. We do in criminal investigations. Who has signed and the time and the such. The opening of the absentee ballot process. There's a chain of custody involved in that. Then for the challenge ballots, provisional ballots, which are two separate types of ballots, a chain of custody to those. And then, of course, the election day ballots to be sure that all election materials, everything is placed in lock boxes, secured with the initials and the names of whoever has been involved in it. This is just a simple way of dispelling any future accusations, acrimony in the public. And that's what this does, ladies and gentlemen. As usual, you can't do anything without ACCG coming up the middle. You'll see in front of you probably some recommended changes. That's been steered to the chairman, and I guess there's copies that are out to the members. I'm not sure exactly what all of them do. I have concerns that they want to remove certain parts of the chain of custody. I think some of their recommendations may not be off course, but I would urge you to use with caution that it's not diminishing the chain of custody from start to finish. And that's what I'd like for this committee to take a good look at. And that, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the committee, is what this bill does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your presentation and appreciate you bringing the bill. What I thought I might do is there's a committee sub that I had drawn based on the concerns that ACCG had expressed, and I thought I would just go through and it's LC 472157S, and I thought I would just go through that and describe what the specific changes were. There were basically 6 changes. And I did not interpret them, Chairman Powell, as trying to diminish the chain of custody. It was just trying to address some practical situations in a manner that would still preserve that chain, but that's for certainly every member of the committee to make a decision on themselves. The first change was on lines 24 and 25. We added in a manner that prevents the insertion of ballots after the word closed on line 24. And this has to do with drop boxes. The concern I think expressed was that certain drop boxes can be locked but still allow insertion of ballots. So that was trying to clarify what the intent is there. The next change was on lines 77 and 78. We did remove some text there that said chain of custody in line 78, but we replaced it with authorized access to, and then added the word documentation in line 145. So again, I think the issue there was individual chain of custody documents for each ballot would slow down the process of checking in, accepting, and auditing the ballots. And so I think the intent, or at least my understanding, Mr. Chairman, the intent was to track access to the container of the ballot rather than to who touches each ballot. You would still have that access because if anyone had to open the container to touch a ballot, you would still have the record of it in the language that's presented here. Then on lines 98 to 99, let's see if I can find that. Yeah, here we go. It's at the top of page 5 on the substitute. It required that accepted ABM ballots be stored in sealed containers before being reopened, but the comment was that the step is necessary in some jurisdictions, but not necessarily in others. Some of them have containers and some have an actual secure room that has secure access. So we added on that line in 98, we added securely stored in or added the word either right after securely stored in, and then added or appropriately secured and access controlled room after the word container. So the issue there is just some jurisdictions handle that differently, and this is making allowance for that, still maintaining security of the ballots. And then on lines 290 to 291, we removed the word secure sealed from line 290 and added after documentation, such ballot box shall be securely sealed if it is not in the direct control of the poll officers or if it is transferred to a different room or facility for tabulation. That has to again do with the sort of the practical way they receive and process the ballots on the day of the election. And then finally on lines 353 and 358, I think this was just to clarify that we have a section early in the bill that deals with ballots that have not yet been voted. And this was trying to clarify that in these sections we're dealing with ballots that have already been voted. So on line 350, I think it's actually 356, we added no voted ballots shall be handled without a poll official being present, et cetera. So those are the changes on the substitute. Stuart, did I accurately cover those?
Yes, sir, you did. And actually, I wanted to point out, I noticed a small typo on line 100. It talks about, where they're supposed to be in a controlled room. And it currently reads secured and access controlled room, when it should be secured in an access controlled room.
Oh, and?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's just a typo, it looks like, on my part. Sorry.
And no problem. Well, I understand you were doing this at fleet speed there. In line 101.2, do we need an of after the word scanning?
Probably.
Okay. All right. All right, so that, I just wanted to put the bill and the proposed substitute before the committee. And I think, does anyone on the committee have any questions for Chairman Powell? No, thank you. Representative Roberts? Oh, Phil, you're gonna have to help me. Is it Olalaye? Olalaye. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Powell, can you provide me some context on what the current chain of custody is? I know you had mentioned that different localities handle their process differently, and you're trying to bring some uniformity to the process. But in terms of what's currently in law, what is the current chain of custody process?
In a lot of the cases, there may be a chain, but not a specific sign chain, locking and sealing, and the general as to go back to see who has had access to these ballots. And that's what this will do, almost like a criminal investigation. When the criminal investigation is always a chain of custody between evidence and things. This will be treating the ballots throughout the whole process as evidentiary material that needs to be kept and to be kept secured so that you know who has been in them. And that's what this does.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Quick. So is that not currently happening right now?
I don't think it is. Not sufficiently to the point that it needs to be. I mean, I don't think anybody, and I'll tell you this up front, I do not believe that any board of election willfully does things wrong.
Yeah.
But I still think that given what we went through in the 2018 elections and in the 2020 elections, there was such an outroar. 2018 elections, outroar by one political party, 2020 by another political party, and it was because there had not been uniformity between every county and election board in the state. The work of the election reform created that pattern of uniformity in most all the cases, except doing this. At that time, you may remember there were accusations made of that ballot boxes disappearing or somebody raffling through ballot boxes and all that. One of the things we're trying to do is to stop any of that type of dialogue by requiring a specific chain of custody.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Roberts?
Am I on? Okay. First of all, I just want to make sure we clarify the record. Chairman Powell, you said it passed out of the House. I'm looking back because I couldn't remember. That HB 886 actually just made it out of committee. It never went any further than that, according to the record. No?
I don't think that's correct. That bill passed the House. It was over in
Okay.
the Senate.
Okay.
May have been on the back of another bill, but that's what.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I couldn't remember the history of it myself. Okay. So, obviously this is going to impact election supervisors and administrators. Has anyone calculated the amount of time these additional tasks are going to take for the election workers to complete, and the number of additional election workers that might be hired to ensure compliance? Because, and this is going to vary from county to county. I'm not opposed to chain of custody, obviously, but I'm curious who you've talked to, which election supervisors you've talked to, in what counties, how big they are, and what the varying opinions were on whether this was going to be cumbersome.
In the original dialogue and the debate on this bill last year, there was a lot of the election supervisors from across the state. And to the best of my knowledge, it varied depending on all different sizes of counties. There was some of the concerns that they had. The original bill, we had chain of custody even on the blank papers. And a lot of that was done away with on counting the sheafs of papers on the special election papers
Right.
and all of that. There were changes that were made to basically to pacify a lot of them if they made sense. And then we stuck to the main points of a chain of custody. And to my knowledge, we had a pretty well unified support. Now, there's always going to be some of the counties that continue to think, well, we're doing it all right, but at the same time, what we wanted to do is reach a point that every county that is written in stone and codified, that every county operates the same way.
So there's been no, just to clarify, there's been no assessment as to whether this is going to require additional staff.
Well, if you remember the debate of the 2020, 2018, and then 2020, you know, one of the things that was said beyond all things, and that's the sanctity of an election, is a bedrock of our government. And that's what people desired, and that's what we thought was necessary. This is a follow-up behind the election reform, and that's to be sure that we don't have some talking head that stirs the world up unnecessarily to cast any doubts on our election system. And that's the reason we went forward. I don't know if there's an additional cost to this, except maybe the type of secured boxes. And, you know, we'd even said it at that time, you know, you go to the Home Depot if you need to, and you can buy these, you know, the heavy duty boxes, and you outfit them with a lock and chain to them. So, you know, and you put your the documents that would be prescribed by the Secretary of State's office, put them on there about a chain of custody, who enters them, who gets into them, sign it, date it, so we know who had access to those ballots.
I guess I'm just concerned between a county that has 8,000 voters and a county that has hundreds of thousands of voters, that's going to require additional staff. And they're already overburdened, and they've already had costs pushed down onto them to the point that several are questioning whether their budgets are already approved, and they're worried about conducting their elections as it is now because the cost of the BMDs has gone up and other things. And so that's my only, I'm all for making sure our elections are secure, but I want to make sure we're not putting an additional burden that, from what I understand, a lot of these folks are already making sure that they're secure. So that's my comment.
Again, I would submit to you that this is a relatively inexpensive proposition. based on the other issues of the cost of an election. We have certain counties that they don't take the seriousness of an election board or the workers into consideration. But you have seen the last of the old-fashioned days of running an election, I hope, so that this would be an insignificant cost. The bigger cost is going to be the evolution of the election workers. You know, a lot of the counties, they basically relied on volunteers. A lot of those volunteers are getting shorter and shorter to get them to come in to volunteer to work elections. So, you know, it's becoming more professionalized, which is it should be, because it's a very important part of the foundations of our system, and that's the election process.
Thank you for those questions, Representative Roberts. I think our next Representative Anderson.
Thank you. Chairman Powell, I just wanted to refer back to your comments when you were doing your presentation regarding the substitute. When Chairman Leverett went through the substitute, are there any of the changes proposed that you think will weaken or lessen the effectiveness of your bill?
You know, I read through him and I followed him when he was going, and there's one thing that I do have confidence, and that is in Chairman Leverett. I'm not an attorney. I actually work for a living. You know, these are the folks like Chairman Leverett, that they are the ones that are detailed into the legalese, and as he had gone through them, then I had seen at that point that I do not think that any of those are going to diminish what we're trying to do. Matter of fact, it probably made it a better bill, and it might be the one thing the ACCG representing the boards of elections that they might can tip their hat to, because they don't always put forth good ideas, but I think these were probably good ideas.
Thank you, Representative Anderson, and thank you, Chairman Powell, for your compliment followed up by a quick insult. So I appreciate that very much. Representative Bazemore.
Am I on? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairman Powell, I heard there was a question posed with regards to is this practice currently in place, and I heard you say you were not sure. Can Ledge Council advise us at this time if it is currently in place?
I don't have any personal knowledge on the exact procedures that each county board of elections uses, so I think I would have to defer to some of the public comments made when this bill came up for consideration last year, or provisions of this bill came up last year, and it did seem to be that some boards are doing some sort of similar provisions regarding chains of custodies, and others, you know, especially the smaller counties, you know, are not doing procedures that are in line with, currently doing procedures that are in line with what's called for in this bill.
Okay. Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, if I might add, as a follow-up to that, Representative, you know, I'm not sure. I mean, probably the better ones to answer might be some of the folks of the Board of Elections out here, but I certainly don't want to belabor this committee meeting by having the whole world chime in unless they want to. But I would say that after the last two general election cycles, and now the third went so well this past year, I think that a lot of those boards of elections were on top of things. I think they were absolutely did not want to see a rehash of the previous two election cycles. And I'll bring attention to the fact that one of the points of anxiety in the rest of Georgia, in other parts of Georgia, had always been how some of the metro counties were a day, 2 days, 3 days getting their votes counted. Well, this year they had their business in order. They had things turned in. So across the state, the election results were done. They were done. There was nobody to talk about leaking bathrooms or faulty this or faulty that, to the point that, you know, pleasant surprise that it put some confidence back into our election process and suspicions that may have arisen. So do I think that these elections boards, what's the common practice? I think the common practice is yes for them to want to secure, but still this takes it to that step of being sure. Once you codify the law, then you will then have a blueprint so that you're then not just leaving it up to every board of elections and say, well, we think we're doing it right, because we all think our boards of elections do it right. But there still needs to be uniformity.
Thank you. And I had two other questions here. So I heard you say about the boxes also. Do you think that we should have uniformity with the secure boxes and not, I heard you say go to the store purchase. Do you see that being an issue down the road, that the boxes are not the same and not secure enough?
You know, I do not, because there again, when I made a reference to the event that happened a few years ago, that they were talking about boxes that got wet and things like this. Well, you know, I don't even know if you can buy a pasteboard box unless you go to the landfill these days. I think you go to the, they make secured boxes. I know that the ones that I'm talking about at Home Depot is a very secure rubber container. It's got locking lids on it, and it would be quite easily to put a chain with a lock through there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we never did get into the specifications because, quite frankly, I wouldn't want to create another cottage industry for somebody to sell a $10 storage box for $100 or $200 to a county because it's labeled to be special. Common sense has got to be, common sense needs to prevail at some point.
Thank you. And my last concern actually is I want to piggyback on my colleague with the cost of additional staffers, material, whatever it takes, because we know in SB 202 it restricts some of the election boards from receiving monies from outside agencies, which they had in prior years to help put on these elections. So I see that as a concern going forward with adding on additional things that they have to do. Where would that money come from?
From the coffers of the county that funds the election board. And I will say that when the question is asked about what other work, well, you know, if you have 2 people as prescribed by law, or 3 people that are going to pick up these ballots, whether it be from the drop boxes to transferring to whatever during the process. Well, I don't see how much extra cost that we could be talking about that you sign a statement. You initial the statement about who's been in that box, who had access to that box, and it's sealed in the container or sealed on the container. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bazemore. I think, who was up? Representative Maynor.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a point of clarification. So, and I'm not really, I guess it's a point of clarification. So this entire bill, and I'm looking at substitute HB 17 LC 47215-7S. Everything that's not underlined is already currently law. And so the only thing really that we're questioning today, the main thing I see is, 49 through 53, we're introducing a ballot transfer form. And on that ballot transfer form, on line 60, we're also saying that we must be documenting the date and time of that ballot transfer form. And on 99 through 101, again, everything is what happened during this last election. Everything is the same, but again, what we will be changing now is 99 through 101. We're talking about a sealed container. I don't see anything where it says that there has to be uniformity in the container between the different counties. So really, that's just a point of clarification for myself as a still fairly new legislator. Everything that is not underlined happened during the last election, except we didn't have this ballot transfer form. Now, what would have been interesting, I don't know if we ever solicit people to come, but it would have been interesting to see what, say, a Fulton County did, since it's the largest county, and they did perform so well compared to other years. It would have been interesting hearing from them to see how the changes that are already present impacted them. That's just my point of clarification.
Well, I think part of the issue here, and I don't intend to speak for Chairman Powell, was the purpose of the bill, because I was a co-sponsor, is to try to impose some uniformity and sort of a higher standard of chain of custody. I personally don't do chain of custody in my business, but the lady that Chairman Powell mentioned who came to speak to the Madison County Club did, or Madison County Party did, that's what she does for a living. So we were trying, based on some of her experience, to impose uniform standards, but it still would allow some variation. You don't necessarily have to use the same kind of sealed container. As long as you use a sealed container, it may be, in Fulton County, they're able to have access to a type of container that's not as easily obtainable down in Valdosta or Waycross. And so we're trying just to impose, I think, a uniform standard, but there still can be some local variation from it. And that, I think, is part of the point of the substitute, is to allow some variation to accommodate the needs of different counties while still maintaining the same general, clarifying in the law what the standards are. I don't know if that's responsive to your concern, Representative Maynard, but.
It is, thank you. And just agreeing with my colleague, Representative Roberts, for those that weren't here last year when we discussed this bill, I gave an example of an election that I was in. It was a special election, and that election went to court, and the electors, they brought the ballot box of ballots to be viewed in court, and Fulton County left the ballot box in the courtroom, and the judge had to then go and ask someone to go get the people responsible for the box. So my thought was, just when that happened, what would have happened if the judge, nor I, or anybody else in that courtroom saw that this box of ballots was left? So I agree that a chain of custody is very important.
Thank you, Representative.
If I might add to that.
Yes, sir. If I want to make sure we have time for
Yeah.
speakers, so please try to keep your comments brief.
If I might add to
We
that,
have another question too.
over the last year or so when we were doing this bill originally, we had a lot of testimony from different boards of elections. And that was pretty well concerned that they knew what a secured box would be. And it needs to be secured. Secondly, in the question that you asked about in a matter of superior court, if under a judge's order that they have to bring it, then it would be with that chain of custody intact. And if asked by the courts to order it, whoever's in charge of it would then have to sign for that. Because as we all know, there's an old saying some of us subscribe to, that the only difference between a Georgia Superior Court judge and God Almighty is God Almighty knows he's not a Georgia Superior Court judge. And in that case, with all due respect to the bar and to these judges, that judge would have, in the case of a pending hearing in court, then the judge would also understand the necessity of a chain of custody. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. And for members of the bar and judges, that's Alan Powell, 6th floor CLOB. Please address your cards and letters to him, not to the chairman of the subcommittee.
Or call me.
What's that?
Or call me.
Or call him. Representative Olaleye?
Olalie, we're getting closer.
Olaleye. All right,
That's
I'm going to
good.
get it, I promise, really.
I appreciate it, Chair. This is more of a comment. So I've been sitting back listening to the conversation. I appreciate the point raised by Representative Maynor. The majority of the processes outlined in this bill are already state rule, correct? And so the rub for me, we understand every county is so different in terms of staffing, in terms of resources, and the changes underlined within this bill will create an administrative burden on those county election boards to run their elections. And so I know Chairman Powell, you had mentioned earlier in your statement that this past cycle was a really good cycle. And so in my mind, if we had a great cycle and there is no high incidence of ballot tampering or boxes disappearing, it's hard for me to justify, and we don't even know what that cost would be, but I know that there will be a cost. There are, hundreds of counties with just very different resources at their disposal to adopt these changes with fidelity. And so I would like to think and ask our committee to do a little bit more work to cost out what those administrative burdens from a staffing and management standpoint would be before moving forward with this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Roberts.
While I've been trying to recollect what happened with this bill last time, and I was wrong about the ultimate it getting put into another bill, I do remember that the testimony from election officials, predominantly they were opposed to this last time, and I don't think any of the provisions that I remember hearing them speak about have been removed from this bill. I feel like we're trying to correct a problem that, frankly, you just admitted we had a great cycle. And so my election supervisors are telling me the cost burden of what they're already having to do right now is too much. And so I just can't justify putting something that's not really, there's no problem to solve, to put additional burdens, financial or otherwise, on them. And you also referenced struggling to get workers. Yes, it's great that we're professionalizing it, but I think the struggle to get workers is also because of this, because of these additional burdens. It's a lot. So that's why I'm struggling with this one. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I think at this point I'd like to move on to the public testimony because we're running a little short on time, and I don't want to impinge on the next subcommittee. So we'll just go through our list while I'm moving along the right line here. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. All right, so the first person on our list is Ann Gray. Is it Herring? Ms. Herring, why don't you come up and speak to us? And I was going to say that we have limited time. I can only give you about yes, ma'am, over there. Just about 2 or 3 minutes, and I apologize.
No, I understand we're short on time, and Molly very kindly distributed a written testimony that I wrote as well, so you all should have that to reference. So I will try and keep this.
Yes, we do have that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. So I'll try and keep my comments here very brief. But my name is Ann Gray Herring. I am the policy analyst for Common Cause Georgia. Common Cause is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to upholding the core values of democracy. And, we just want to raise some concerns about this and really echo a lot of what, Representative Roberts and Representative Bazemore pointed out about the costs and the administrative burdens and, what Representative Ollier, is that right? Olalier, I'm so sorry. That each county is very different and has different needs, different resources, and, whether work has been done figuring out what exactly those burdens are that we would be imposing here, and, whether there is any actual risk that would be prevented by this measure that's not already covered by existing laws and existing county protocols. So ultimately, we think the potential costs of this bill would outweigh its potential benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, I don't see you have any questions, but thank you very much for your testimony. Cindy Battles. Thank you, Ms. Battles.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. So Molly was really kind, your very first meeting, to pass out my recommendations for chain of custody, just because I wanted y'all to have a chance to actually look at these before this particular committee meeting. If any of you did not get that or it got lost in the shuffle, I have extra. Because if you know me, you probably already know I love handouts. So basically, I get what Chairman Powell is trying to do. I think chain of custody is important. I think if we're looking at what is happening with the White House and confidential documents everywhere, we would all agree the chain of custody is important. I think my problem currently is the way that y'all are going about this. I think that y'all are taking care of a problem that isn't actually your responsibility to take. I think it's the state election board and the election supervisors. And one of the reasons I think that is because they have a better understanding of how each county works. Y'all keep talking about two people going somewhere to pick up absentee ballots from a drop box, but Jennifer in Morgan County tells me there's no going anywhere. Her drop box is literally in the office in front of the counter. So what we keep doing is, and with all due respect, we are still legislating the 2020 election. Conspiracy theories and things that are not true, and if things like this fixed it, then the moment that Giuliani's expert witness said, oh, if you did a full hand count during the RLA, this would dispute our accusation, we'd be done, right? This is not going to fix conspiracy theories. I wish it did. It's not. But we are continuing to legislate an election that is over, and we are putting burdens on election officials and poll workers that they should not have to deal with. What I would love to see, and I've talked to a number of y'all already, I would love to see a study committee that looks at the impact of HB 316 and SB 202 and other legislation and how much it's costing counties. Because y'all changed the phrasing for early voting in SB 202. It's costing white Georgia $15,000. For a population of 660 people and a special election for a school board. So when you're sitting here making decisions like what you're making today, and it seems like a small thing for them to go to Home Depot or wherever they go to get these lock boxes, $15,000 for a special election for a school board, and 660 people isn't the voting age population. That's literally the total population of this city. So I'm just asking y'all, Chairman Duffy, I mean, some of y'all might be surprised to hear me say this. Chairman Duffy's actually doing a really good job. And he's trying to put together some work groups that will come up with recommendations for chain of custody and other things. So if y'all would just put this on pause and let the state election board and the election supervisors do their job and do it in a way that they know what they need and what they can afford. Because they are trying to do their best to run our elections. They do a tremendous job. Some of them have one full-time worker and a part-time worker, and they're having to cut cost, and they're talking about closing polling locations because they can't afford to run their elections. That's all.
Thank you, ma'am. Todd Edwards with ACCG.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, I'm Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I assure you that each time we come up and testify or provide input on an election bill, we take those exact considerations in mind: cost, administrative feasibility, and in some cases, local control to Georgia counties. Yes, everything does have its attendant cost. I think election security, chain of custody, what's been discussed in this bill, they're all very important. We do take those things very seriously. We get input from the counties. We did not ask for this bill, but when we see legislation in front of you, we try to work with you. We appreciate y'all's taking our considerations into the substitute bill. Is it perfect? It depends on who you ask. Our different counties have different opinions on this. We represent all of the state. I think it's a reasonable bill. I do think it's improved since last year. I know time is limited, so I will just say once again, thank you, members. I would appreciate your favorable consideration on the bill in front of you. For the counties that continue to not like the bill, I urge them to contact their election administrators, contact their legislators. For those that do or that don't think it goes far enough, I would urge them to same. We have to represent all counties. I think this is a fine balance. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. If you'll wait, we have one question for you. Representative Maynor.
Thank you. And you might not know the answer to this. Can you give us an estimate, if you had to guess, how much the ballot transfer form would cost for a small county compared to a large county?
I don't know the form itself. I don't see there being much cost. It would be the administration of it. If there were some, and a lot of that's been alleviated through the amendments or the substitute bill that was in front of you, Representative.
Okay.
But I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Representative Roberts.
How have the costs been alleviated? Is that what you just said? Did I misunderstand you?
Better. Reduced. Last year, we were talking about the comparisons. One of the most concerning aspects were the counting and recounting of paper ballots. That's no longer in the bill. The form itself, changing from the secure containers to a secure room, that would help with cost. So we did have recommendations. Are there additional? With most every bill there is, but again, we try to work with you all to limit them to the impact it may or may not have on county taxpayers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Let's see, Tamara Favorito. His phone's ringing downstairs. Oh, Chair.
Thank you. I'm Tamara Favorito, and I served as a poll worker in Coweta County during the 22 elections. And I'd like to thank Chairman Powell for listening to constituent concerns on chain of custody. HB 17 includes many enhancements for which I'm very supportive. One example being that under the existing code, drop boxes were merely closed, which has been a big concern. But line 24 of the bill changes the wording to lock the drop boxes outside of the advanced voting hours. So thank you, sir, for locking the doors. I'm also glad to see that the much-needed ballot monitoring by poll officials has been added to this bill in line 353 through 360. But I'd ask you to consider adding that these monitoring functions must be verified by credentialed poll observers to make the process more transparent. I'd also like to address some of the concerns mentioned here today about what's currently being done. Voter GA has evidence that in the 2020 elections, 355,000 chain of custody forms were missing and over 100,000 were incorrect. So we need these additional procedures. So thank you again for working to secure our elections.
Thank you. I don't believe you have any questions. Thank you very much. Mr. Favorito, Garland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a career IT professional, co-founder of Voter GA. We've led the election integrity movement here in Georgia for 16 years. Chain of custody is one of our top 25 priorities, and there have been several election bills introduced this year, but I believe this is the first election integrity bill that actually improves the security of our elections. It's also the first constituent-driven bill that I know of, and we need a whole lot more of those down here. So thank you, Chairman Powell, for that. We really appreciate that. I'd like to address some of the questions from, this keeps cutting out, but I'd like to address some of the questions that were came up. Representative Roberts was talking about HB 886. That a lot of that was incorporated in HB 1464, as well as Senate Bill 89, which didn't quite pass, as Chairman Powell had already said. In regards to the current chain of custody, it's not visible and it's suspect. No one really knows. And in regards to Fulton County, I live in Fulton County, and I was there on November 14th, the day that 4 senior poll managers found counterfeit ballots in the 2020 election results. I was there. They have signed 4 sworn affidavits that they saw, and they know they were counterfeit because they were not folded from being mailed, even though they were mail-in ballots. They were not marked with pen and pencil. They were not on the correct paper stock, and they were marked the same way down ballot in all of the races for 100 in a row. So the reason that you don't know about this is because we were denied our rights to look at these ballots for 2 years until the Georgia Supreme Court finally ruled in our favor a couple of months ago, and we still have yet to see these ballots. So these are some of the reasons why chain of custody is important. We thank you for bringing this bill today, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions about Fulton County while I'm here, or anything else I've talked about.
I think our time is unfortunately a little limited, Mr. Favorito, but I appreciate your testimony today. Thank you so much. Is it Jim, with Paulding County? Tully. Tully. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, I could not read that. It's much neater than my handwriting, but I was just unable.
I was born to be a doctor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I would just like to say that I am the chairman of the Paulding County Republican Party, and therefore I am in the business of recruiting voters. Any legislation that can come that solidifies the trust in the citizen, in the Georgia voter, to make a connection to their elected officials, that we all look for free and fair elections, is extremely important. I am completely 100% behind more security at the absentee box. I am 100% behind security for day of absentee, for day of election ballots. In terms of costs, Board of Elections workers are moving these boxes already. It takes nothing to reach down with a pencil and say, I've checked this one out. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your dedication to this state, and have a great rest of your day.
And you have no questions. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Stully. I'm sorry I didn't get your last name on the first round. But thank you for traveling up here. Well, that concludes, I think, the testimony. At this point, I think I would entertain, I think what we've got is if it's agreeable to the committee, we have a committee substitute with some changes, and I'm advised that if we do wish to act on that and the changes, I would need first have a motion to approve the substitute, which is LC 472157S. And I'm prepared to entertain a motion to that effect. All right. Second. Representative Gullett and Representative Anderson, second. Do we have any discussion on that motion? All right. Then I would, I'm sorry, Representative Hood.
We need to address the typos in here, the two typos on line 100 and 101. So
I'm advised we do that by a motion for an amendment, which is not in order until we have the motion on the underlying bill. Yeah, I know. We're getting there. All right. So at this point now, I would entertain a motion to amend that bill by replacing the word "and" on line 100 with the words "in an," I-N space A-N, and then inserting the word "of" on line 101 between the words "scanning" and "such." Does anyone wish to make that motion? So moved. Chairman Powell moves. Do we have a second? Second. A second. All right. Any discussion on that motion? All right. I believe it's appropriate to vote on the amendment first. So we're voting on the amendment. So on the motion and second, I think we go in back order when we actually vote on it. I'll call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. The amendment is approved. And then we already have a motion and second on the substitute pending So we would now be voting on the substitute as revised by the amendments. All right, so all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. And all those opposed? The substitute as amended, LC 472157S with those amendments passes. Or we're recommending to the full committee, I suppose I should say that we recommend do pass. All right, I believe that's the conclusion of our business. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Chairman Anderson, I'm sorry to take some of your time. Thank you very much, everyone. We're adjourned.
We're going to start the state and local subcommittee meeting here in about 3 or 4 minutes. So if everybody will kind of get prepared for that. We will have a sign-up sheet on the table up front if anybody's interested in signing up to speak. Okay, if I can have everybody's attention, we're going to get started with the, this is our Governmental Affairs, State and Local Government Subcommittee. My name is Victor Anderson. I'm chairing the subcommittee. To my left is my sidekick, Stephen Saines, Representative Saines, who is the vice chair of the subcommittee. I welcome you all here, and at this moment I'm going to turn the microphone over to now Chairman Saines, since the only bill we have to take up and consider today is one that I am presenting.
Well, I guess that makes you Batman if I'm Robin. So, welcome, and you want to present from over here? All right, whatever you prefer. We are hearing House Bill 193. I will go ahead and say the LC. If the author sees a correction, let us know. LC 472070. We'll go ahead and start with the author's testimony and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. LC 472070, House Bill 193. This is the definition of what we jokingly refer to as a simple bill. It does one thing and it does it twice, but it takes 3 pages to do it. So I apologize for that part. If you look at line 13 and line 48 in the copy of the bill, you will see that what we have simply done is stricken through the dollar amount $100,000 and replaced it with a dollar amount of $250,000. What that is, in the year 2000, it was signed into law on April 20th of 2000, House Bill 10, I think it was 1079. Thank you. 1079 was signed into law, which is the Public Works, well, I've kind of referred to it as a Public Works Purchasing, but it's the Public Works Construction Project Law. And this particular section of that code addressed what local city and county governments and authorities can spend without having to put out for bid. Having been in local government, as many of the members of this committee and subcommittee have, the bid process typically takes about 3 months or better, depending on the project and the scope of work. So many of these public works projects get delayed when they have to go out to bid. That dollar amount, again, was in year $2,000 of $100,000. We are proposing to change that and increase that to $250,000. There was some discussion about tying it to some index, like the Consumer Price Index or possibly the PPI, the Producer's Price Index. The problem is those numbers change, they fluctuate all the time, and the complication becomes a little onerous, and it's not quite as simple as that. So that's the bill. This is the presentation. I'll be willing to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see. Is there anyone in the committee who has any questions for the author? Sure. All right. We'll check if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to speak. Oh, we've got a question from Chairman Emeritus Taylor of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to, at the appropriate time. Thank you.
We do got a couple members of the audience who'd like to speak to this bill. Your cursive's clean, but I'm of a generation that has a hard time reading it. Mark? Woodall. Okay, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Mark Woodall. I represent Associated General Contractors. We've had the pleasure of working on this issue for literally over 22 years. GMA, Georgia Municipal Association, Association of County Commissioners, worked with the industry to create the law 22 years ago. And I will tell you the partnership exists today at least 2 or 3 times in the last 4 to 5 years. Whenever there's an issue that comes up, we collectively work on the issue together, and we've been fortunate to get good legislation passed. You know, one of the things we did very recently, the original law used to require projects to be advertised in the legal organ where the project was going to take place. Y'all passed legislation that recognizes DOAS to advertise these projects for free. And not only do they advertise state projects, but they advertise local projects for free. So a small builder can go one place and find both state opportunities and local government opportunities. I don't want to talk this thing to death, but I will just tell you there's a great partnership between the cities and the counties who came to us and asked if we could support raising the threshold. We think it is absolutely appropriate to do so, and we support the bill.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony. Kathleen Bowen with ACCG.
Hello, Kathleen Bowen with ACCG. I don't want to talk you out of your motion, but we did have the Macon County Commissioner, Kelvin Lewis, drive up here, and I'd like for him to have an opportunity to share why this is important to counties. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Kelvin Lewis, Macon County in Oglethorpe, not to be confused with Macon Bibb as a consolidated government. As a Chief Executive Officer, it is very important that we have these efficiencies. We thank the chairman and the colleagues for giving us this opportunity to be able to create efficiencies, to be able to get local talent in, and to move these processes along, because in this inflationary period, the longer it takes, the more expensive it becomes, and we want to be good fiduciaries of the taxpayers' investment. So thank you so much for that opportunity. We're always here to at your disposal when needed.
Thank you. Just make sure we had your role recorded correctly. County manager?
County manager,
Thank
that's
you.
correct.
Appreciate
Yes.
it. Fun job. And then Ryan Bowersox, sorry. GMA. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. GMA is also in support of this bill. Want to thank our partnership with the General Contractors of Georgia and ACCG, and urge your favorable consideration today. Thank you very much.
All right. See, cooling down the room made all the level-headedness come here. All right. Without any other committee questions or testimony, we will entertain a motion for the bill. Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to pass.
Do we got a second? We have a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The committee, the subcommittee passes it on to the full committee. Would you like to take over? All right. We are adjourned.